about the self-regulation perspective when it comes to personality. Self-regulation involves basically, monitoring your own behavior, responding to feedback, essentially, or in the serving of goal-directed behavior. So basically, the self-regulation perspective looks at personality from the perspective of us as people seeking goals and kind of monitoring our progress toward these goals. Today we're going to focus on Ajzen's theory of planned behavior and his model predicting the intention to engage in a behavior and then following through and engaging in the behavior itself. And this model, as it says, the theory of planned behavior, reflects the idea that the purpose of it is to predict behavior that we are intentionally trying to follow through on, that we are trying to consciously, deliberately trying to engage in a particular behavior. Okay, now I'm going to go to Ajzen's website here. You can just do a Google search and find it here. And he actually puts up the model for this particular this particular model for the theory of planned behavior. And basically, you have these predictive components, and these components here predict your intention to engage in the behavior, and then it is the behavior itself. So if we click here, so the example is the behavior. This is the actual behavior that is going to be engaged in. So let's say, I remember one time I can tell you that the theory of planned behavior has been applied to many different things. In fact, I did research a couple of years ago where I used this particular model to predict the behavior of going to visit your professors during his or her office hours. So in other words, the idea is, what are the components that essentially predict students' likelihood to actually go ahead and visit their professors. I saw at a conference once where there was they've applied the theory of planned behavior to going to take yoga lessons. So it can be applied to many different planned intentional behaviors. So the behavior essentially is what you're trying to predict. Ultimately, that's the actual behavior you're going to be observing. And then you can but ultimately before the behavior, you have your intention to behave. And this is your essentially readiness to perform the given behavior. And presumably this is the immediate antecedent of the behavior. Okay, so in other words, all these other factors here that we're going to go over, they predict your intention to engage in the behavior. And presumably, once you have this intention, it's just a quick prediction to go into the behavior itself. However, there could be, as you can see here, a couple of potential roadblocks that interfere with your intention to engage in the behavior. One is your perceived behavioral control. Okay? And your perceived behavioral control essentially is your perceived ability to perform the behavior. If your perceived behavioral control is low, if you don't believe you have the ability to perform the behavior, then you are going to you can have the intention, but it is not going to be you're not going to feel able to follow through on it. You might say like, well, I would do it if I could, but I can't. Okay? And notice here, the perceived behavioral control is a function of your control beliefs and the perceived power of that control factor. And let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about those control beliefs here. So if you click on here, control beliefs, your control beliefs are your essentially your control beliefs are those factors that you believe will either help you perform the behavior or hinder your performance in the behavior. So essentially, so for example, maybe if it is yoga class, maybe it has to do with the yoga. The nearest yoga class is 15 miles away, and that, presumably, that might prevent you from engaging in the behavior. Okay, so that's your perceived behavioral control. But then there's also your actual behavioral control, which may be the same thing as your perceived behavioral control, but there may be other factors that you haven't considered that might actually prevent you from actually doing the behavior. Okay? Maybe you may have the means to get to your yoga class, but maybe you just have a really bad back. And if you try those yoga exercises, you're going to hurt your back and you're not going to be able to do it. So you actually can't do the behavior. So that reflects your actual behavioral control. If you really can't do it, you can't do it. Okay? So again, the idea is, you need to be able to believe that you can actually do the behavior. That's your perceived behavioral control. There have to be the factors that could be either interfering with your ability to do it, or helping you do the behavior. You need to be aware of those your control beliefs. And of course, the actual behavioral control essentially is what actually might be preventing you from doing it, whether or not you're actually aware of it. Okay? Then another predictor of your intention is a subjective norm. Okay? What is a subjective norm? This is this perceived social pressure to engage in the behavior. Maybe if we're talking about yoga class again, maybe there is maybe you have a lot of New Age friends who really are into yoga and are really would say, boy, yoga would be so great for you, or we would like you a whole lot better if you went to yoga class or something like that. So these are the subjective norms, the belief in the various pressure, how much you perceive all the social pressure to engage in this behavior, how much are you believing that this peer pressure may be influencing you. And the strength, basically this is your subjective norm is a function of the strength of your normative belief weighted by the motivation to comply. So in other words, you may have somebody who is maybe someone very close to you, someone very powerful, someone very influential, who might be wanting you to do something, and maybe if that's the case, you may have a high motivation to comply with it. On the other hand, maybe your motivation to comply may not be that good. So let's take a look at those normative beliefs. So this is what you perceive as the expectations of important individuals or groups, maybe your spouse or family, friends, and essentially, for the subjective norm, essentially you're combining that with how motivated you are to actually comply. Okay? So bottom line is those normative beliefs, leading to the subjective norm. So in other words, normative beliefs, who are the people that really want you to do? Are you aware of them? And then your subjective norm essentially being how do you perceive the social pressure? How much is it pressuring you? So, for example, going back to the intention to engage in taking yoga classes, you have this subjective norm. In other words, if you have a lot of your friends that are very important to you, that are influencing you, that want you to do this, so those high normative beliefs, and you also realize, and you also have a high motivation to do what they want you to do, then that would increase your intention to increase the likelihood of you intending to engage in that behavior. Finally, the last component we're going to be talking about is your behavioral beliefs and your attitude towards the behavior. So let's start with behavioral beliefs. Okay? This is essentially the belief that the behavior that you're going to engage in will produce a particular outcome. You believe that if you go and take yoga classes, you'll be healthier and whatnot. If you think that that these are the things you need to do, that if you do those things, you will be successful and successfully get through yoga classes. Okay? So those might be your behavioral beliefs. And what is your attitude towards that behavior? Do you believe that if you do this behavior and you'd be successful at it, is this something you really want to do? How much would you enjoy being successful taking yoga classes? How important would that be to you? So that would be your attitude towards the behavior. Okay. How positive do you feel? And again, this represents the strength of the particular behavioral beliefs, weighted by its evaluation, how much whether you like that particular outcome that you're looking for, and that's your overall attitude towards the behavior. So, bottom line, this is a very elaborate model to show how you predicting your intention to engage in a particular deliberate behavior. Now, one criticism of this particular theory is that really it only deals with those behaviors that we consciously want to plan and do. And much of what we do is unplanned. And often those unplanned things get in the way of our plans. So it may be limited in terms of what this theory can actually predict. It doesn't predict everything we do, but it certainly predicts some things that we do. And I guess one of the things you need to consider is that from this whole self-regulation perspective, the idea is, with this perspective, it's very much dealing with intentional behavior, how you want to plan your behaviors, keep yourself updated on your progress toward goals. So it's very much organized around your intention. But anyway, we will talk about the feedback loop in our next discussion here.